This is CBN Newswatch.
It is Monday, June 22nd. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, President Donald Trump facing political controversies in Washington over John Bolton's book and Attorney General William Barr after his rally in Tulsa. We're going to take a look ahead at the presidential race as well. Shootings in the occupied zone in Seattle this weekend, while Christians of different races in Atlanta stand together to reject racism. Is there a difference between the concept of social justice and biblical justice? We're going to hear from a well-known black pastor and scholar. And with the coronavirus lockdowns ending, a unique way to go to church, coming by boat and by beach. All those stories and more are ahead in this edition of CBN Newswatch. I want to begin this half hour with President Donald Trump facing political controversies after his campaign rally in Tulsa Saturday night. A federal judge ruled an explosive book written by former National Security Advisor John Bolton can be released. And Democrats are outraged over Attorney General William Barr's firing of a federal prosecutor who is investigating the president and some of his aides and allies. Gary Lane is on the story.
Campaign 2020 is now in full swing, with the president holding his first rally since March, and as pre-4th of July political fireworks erupt in Washington. In Tulsa, the president blamed the media for spreading fear and negativity about the rally. He also said protesters outside the arena blocked access, leading to a smaller than expected crowd and empty seats.
You are warriors. Thank you. We had some very bad people outside. They were doing bad things. I stand before you today to declare the silent majority is stronger than ever before.
The silent majority is the least of the president's concerns this week. A federal judge has ruled that this book, The Room Where It Happened, written by former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton, can be released. In an exclusive interview with ABC News' Martha Raddatz, Bolton accuses Trump of putting his own interests ahead of the country's.
He was so focused on the re-election that longer-term considerations fell by the wayside.
Slamming Trump on his negotiations with North Korea and Russia's President Putin.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle.
In his ruling, the judge said Bolton gambled with national security and opened himself to civil and potential criminal liability. But drafts of the book are already in the hands of the media, and there's no calling them back. The president says Bolton's book is full of lies, and he may be prosecuted for revealing classified information. Bolton says he's confident there's no classified information in the book. Senator Tim Scott says Bolton should have appeared when given a chance to testify before the House last year.
For $29.95, he can monetize his national security clearance, but under oath, he would have had an opportunity to answer questions and not just make assertions.
Meanwhile, at the Department of Justice, political fallout for the president and the attorney general over the firing of the federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. Jeffrey Berman sent the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, to prison and was looking into current Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani for his work investigating Hunter Biden and Ukraine. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler says Attorney General Barr deserves to be impeached for doing the president's bidding. President Trump denies involvement in the firing.
That's all up to the Attorney General. Attorney General Barr is working on that, so that's really up to him. I'm not involved.
The president's critics say he's been pushing for Berman's firing for months. Nadler's committee will investigate. So a long, hot summer with a politically charged atmosphere is expected in Washington. All of this, of course, comes as Attorney General William Barr says prosecutor John Durham is likely to reveal by the end of summer details of his investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. That was the FBI surveillance operation of the 2016 Trump campaign. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And with us now to talk more about the presidential race and the rally in Tulsa over the weekend is Noah Weinrich. He is with the Heritage Action for America. So turnout much lower than those we expected. What do you think that is? Is this a sign of weakening support? What accounts for the low turnout?
What we saw on Saturday were thousands of Oklahomans coming out to celebrate 3 years of conservative policy successes in the White House and Congress. President Trump immediately touted his record-breaking pace of federal judges, his tax cuts, his regulation cuts, and many more policy successes. The media initially painted the rally as having too many attendees. They raised concerns of COVID-19, but when turnout didn't quite fill the arena, the narrative has shifted to say that there were too few attendees. But if you look at the rally on Saturday, people were very energized, and the grassroots momentum in 2020 is strong. There were obviously COVID concerns still. There were protesters and issues with law enforcement at the event. So I don't think that attendance on Saturday is really a bellwether for the 2020 campaign. I think there's a lot of conservative momentum on the ground.
Let's turn to the polls. They show Biden increasing his lead. He also raised more money than the president last month. What do you think this means? Trouble for the president, or the polls reliable?
It's still 5 months out from the election. I think it's far too early to tell. Just a couple months ago, the polls were very different. A month before that, it looked like Bernie Sanders was going to win the nomination. So it's still far too early. There could always be an October surprise. I think polls are going to shift. And as you saw in 2016, the polls are not always reliable, even the day before the election. I think that this race is going to look very different once debates begin to happen, once the policy records of both candidates are compared, once you start to see large-scale rallies, once you start to see the grassroots really turn out in force after lockdowns end. That grassroots energy is really going to alter this campaign. So I think it's too early to tell. There are so many variables with the economy and coronavirus. We're only beginning the campaign, really.
The president said a vote for Biden is basically an invitation for left-wing radicals to take over the country. Does the current unrest hurt or help the president?
I think it could really strengthen his case. He made the case on Saturday for law and order. I think that is something that many Americans are feeling the need of, even those who really support some of the causes of the protests, including racial justice. Many people are concerned with the lawlessness that they've seen in the protests. And so if President Trump makes the case that he is a president who can get things done on criminal justice, as he did with the First Step Act, while keeping law and order, that could be a very powerful case for many of the country's swing voters, many folks who have conservative tendencies or who really do want to get criminal justice done, but they don't want to see their neighborhoods or families endangered in the process.
All right, Noah Weinrich with the Heritage Action for America. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
A second shooting in Seattle's occupied protest zone in less than 48 hours last Sunday night in the 6-block area in downtown Seattle known as CHOP, which stands for Capitol Hill Occupied Protest. The victim was at a hospital in serious condition. That came after a shooting before dawn Saturday in the zone that left a 19-year-old man dead and a 33-year-old man critically injured. Police moved in, as seen on this body camera video, where protesters forced police away.
Please move out of the way so we can get to the victim. All we're trying to do is get to the victim.
The suspects fled the scene and no arrest have been made, at least as of Sunday. Police have only been going into the zone if there is an active shooter or a mass casualty. President Donald Trump has criticized the city's Democratic mayor and the state's Democratic governor for allowing the zone to continue. Thousands of Christians from churches across the Atlanta area came to Centennial Olympic Park Friday to oppose racism and to declare unity from the church across racial lines, class, denomination, and culture. It was all part of the One Race Movement's March in Atlanta Juneteenth event, which is celebrated in many states across the country as the day slaves in Texas found out they were free 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn plans to introduce a bipartisan bill to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Coming up, a look at social justice and biblical justice and what one well-known black scholar is saying about both. We've got that story for you when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
And welcome back to CBN Newswatch. Talk of social justice as the answer to the problems of racism in America is in the front of people's minds and our culture right now. But one well-known black pastor and scholar says it's often radically different from biblical justice. Mark Martin spoke with FaithWire.com's Dan Andros for more on what Dr. Vadi Bachman had to say.
Dan, an African-American professor and Christian, says that social justice and biblical justice aren't the same. Tell us about his comments he made on talk radio.
Yeah, that's right. It's Dr. Vadi Bachman, and he is a professor, former pastor, a theologian, wears a lot of hats, and he has been speaking out about the issue of social justice for a long time, and he describes at length and in detail, and you can check out his full interview over on faithwire.com, but he talks about how social justice isn't exactly the same as biblical justice because there's a lot of political motivations behind the social justice movement. A lot of it is built on Marxist ideologies, and the solutions they seek end up being outside of the gospel.
Vadi Bachman says people are speaking two different languages in the racism debate. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, he talked about where the divide happens a lot of time is because you have two competing worldviews, and a lot of it stems from some of this social justice, which he says is built on a sort of a structural worldview where you look at things as institutions and structures and power structures and hierarchies. And so when those two groups of people see an incident like the George Floyd incident, one side automatically sees it as just confirmation of a racist structural system, whereas the other sees it as an individual sin or an individual wrongdoing by a person, and they seek to rectify it that way. And so one person's reacting to it saying, see, here's the system. And the other person saying, here's an individual doing poorly. Let's look at the stats and, the situation and everything else. And so that's how we end up having two different conversations because our starting points are very different.
Dan, he also coined the phrase ethnic Gnosticism. What's that?
Yeah, well, that is this idea, and I'm going to read it here so I don't mess it up, but it's this idea that people groups and ethnicities have the ability to possess a secret knowledge of motive, intent, and goals in specific situations. So basically, you experience things as part of a people group, and anyone outside of that people group, they don't understand it, and they can never understand it. And so Bachman makes the distinction between that, and he says, as Christians, we have to understand that our knowledge comes from God, and that God is the source of all knowledge, and that scriptures are sufficient. But he sees a lot of this, what he calls ethnic Gnosticism, in some of the movements that are pushing solutions today.
Did Bachman address violent protests versus peaceful ones?
He didn't exactly. What he did do was kind of dive more into the differences we see between the two people, and that's what's driving it. Again, those differences between people who view things as more structural, more systemic, versus the individual behavior, and that's where he says is driving a lot of the tension that we see out there.
Let's talk big picture. What is his message for African Americans as a whole in all of this?
Yeah, well, he says that he himself grew up in L.A. To a single mother who wasn't a Christian, who was a Buddhist, and so he's been on the wrong end of police misbehavior himself, so he understands the problem. But he says that he's traveled around the world. He's actually teaching in Africa right now. And he says that black people are some of the strongest people that he's seen. He said they overcome slavery. They've overcome slavery in America as just case in point, an obvious one. And he was saying that in America, compared to the rest of the world, that black people are incredibly prosperous, bar none, he said. And his message is that you don't need white people's permission. You don't need them to do anything in order to achieve and live free in America.
All right, Dan Andros of faithwire.com. Thanks for bringing us this story, Dan. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Also tonight on FaithWire, a look at the possibility of more violence in Seattle's occupied zone. We'll have that and more. You can find it on faithwire.com's Faith versus Culture. It begins at 9:30 Eastern with Dan Andros and Dale Partridge. You can find that on the CBN News Channel. Still ahead, something new for graduating high school seniors this year. The coronavirus outbreak meant many of them did not have their normal graduation ceremonies or proms even. So to lift them, many senior citizens have reached out to them. We're going to tell you about seniors adopting seniors right after this.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
For many years, high school students have served their communities by adopting senior citizens. Well, now, thanks to the coronavirus, we're actually seeing the reverse, with senior citizens adopting high school seniors. Our Mark Martin returns now to show us how residents at one senior living campus reached out to the graduating class of 2020.
We've seen how this pandemic put a damper on family celebrations, from birthdays to marriages to senior class milestones like proms and graduation ceremonies. To help lift up members of the class of 2020, residents at the senior living community Westminster-Canterb on Chesapeake Bay reached out with advice and lessons learned from the past.
You are there to learn. Go to every class. I never cut a class while I was in college.
Resident and former teacher Neola Waller chatted with Cox High School senior Alexandria Pisano as part of the program Seniors Celebrating Seniors. By using a birdsong tablet, the video communication tool developed by Westminster-Canterb, the residents safely spoke with the graduating seniors.
What kind of advice did you give her?
Well, having taught seniors for 30 years, I have lots of advice, and your time is too short for me to tell it all. But I had some items. For one, I said, just remember, when you go to college, you will be learning something, and your parents will expect you to graduate with a marketable skill.
Pisano plans to attend Old Dominion University to major in neonatal nursing. She describes Waller, who's 91 years young, as an amazing woman.
As a first-generation college student, it was really hard to kind of figure out what I was expecting to get into. So her adopting me really made me kind of get inspiration on what to expect and how to pursue my career. She gave me really great advice.
And Pisano says what made her relationship with Waller even more special was the fact that Waller taught at Cox High School for 30 years.
I still keep in touch with a lot of my students.
It was just amazing to speak to her, and we had a great relationship, and honestly, I feel like we're going to have a forever relationship. I'm going to come back from school and visit her just to talk to her about advice on what I should do in school, because I know I'm going to be lost.
She has a wonderful smile, which I think will be very healing and accepting of her patients. I've loved talking with you.
I know you gave me such great advice.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
Coming up, the coronavirus outbreak has also inspired the creation of a new type of church service right here in the Virginia Beach area this summer. We're going to show you Boat Church when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
As the coronavirus lockdowns are lifted, people are returning to church across the country. And as many believers came together Sunday in Virginia Beach, they came by boat and beach for something a little different this summer. It's called Boat Church. Our Wendy Griffith was there.
It was a picture-perfect morning. For those torn between being outside on a beautiful summer day and going to church, Boat Church here at the Narrows at First Landing State Park in Virginia Beach offers the perfect solution.
We have just really missed being in church, as I'm sure so many families have, and we have 4 kids, so for them to be able to be out here on a beautiful day and worship and hear the word and play on the beach, it's just been a really special morning on Father's Day for sure.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son.
Several local churches are taking part in Boat Church. Sunday, Adam Cates, the preacher at Big House Church, gave a message on God's love.
In the Gospels, Jesus preached some of his best messages from a boat. There's a reason people come to the shore, come to the beach, or love to get out on their boat. There's something that connects us in the spirit through water.
Organizer and former Governor Bob McDonnell says the inspiration for Boat Church came from a similar experience he had at Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia.
We kind of copied the Smith Mountain Lake Boat Church idea and started the planning about a year ago. We think this is just providential that the planning ended up with this concept to start in the middle of a pandemic when people were looking for a way to be together to worship.
Co-organizer Cheryl McCluskey says the hope of Boat Church is also to inspire those who don't know the Lord.
I've always wanted to bring in people that don't believe in the Lord and people that don't go to church on Sundays. And if we're touching one person, then this is worth it, and we're just so pleased.
Boat Church plans to meet every Sunday at 10 a.m. at First Landing State Park until September 6th. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
Beautiful concept. Time now for your Monday motivation. I leave you with this thought. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Listen to him and dive deeply into his word. And know this, God's instruction requires obedience without delay. With that word, I encourage you to make today a marvelous Monday, and you can make this week a wonderful week. That will do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. You can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories, so email us right here, newswatch@cbn.com. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless.